Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. As all of you can see, I have with me Brigadier S.K. Chatterji. He's somebody who's been talking about a lot of very new developments in terms of warfare and national security for a long time in his magazine, the bharatshakti.in. Sir, thank you so much for joining me the second time for a very interesting session on hybrid warfare, something that we hear around us a lot of times, but probably is not understood to its entirety.
Thank you, Aadi. Always nice to be there with you.
Thank you, sir. So, as I was saying, this is a term which has been used quite a bit around. We can hear that even in the news channels today. But I don't think the complete understanding of the term hybrid warfare is there. So what is it? How would you kind of describe what is hybrid warfare? What is it that we're talking about here, sir?
See, a lot of people have gone about in as far as this terminology, let's say, originating. One of those that come to my mind is that it was in 2007 that Frank Hoffman, he put this terminology across. But if you really ask military professionals, they'll tell you that hybrid warfare has been a form of warfare, as long as warfare has been there in the human civilization. So it will be difficult to really come down to that, come down to the exact origin. I would say I would take from what the way the US Army really looks at it, hybrid warfare. They say that it's a diverse and dynamic combination of both irregular forces and regular forces. It could be regular armed forces of a country. You can also combine in that criminal elements. You can combine certain other forms of warfare, like electronic warfare we talk about, like cyber warfare we talk about. So it's actually a huge mix of things that goes to make hybrid warfare as such. And the whole attempt is to keep it a little below the level of conventional warfare. That's where it operates the best.
Just to keep it just below so that there is no retaliation as per se, sir.
Yeah, definitely. There are these aspects of retaliation, there are these aspects of attributability. Moment you go into conventional, you're really going to move big forces with the kind of transparency that we have. Attribution is straight away possible. But this is where you are leaving a doubt somewhere about attributability aspect also. You can point a finger, but it's difficult to get there.
I think in today's lingo, who done it would be probably an apt description. You leave the doubt in the mind as to who done the crime or whatever action that has been taken place. So, what are the constituents and the characteristics of this kind of warfare that we can see around us? If you can just share us a couple of examples so that we can understand it a little better.
See, if you talk about examples, well, Afghanistan is an example, Syria is an example. We'll go into deeper issues a little further in the discussion. But by and large, if you're talking about constituents, well, conventional warfare is a constituent of hybrid warfare. It can be a part of hybrid warfare. Irregular warfare, like we understand guerrilla warfare, terrorism, cyber warfare, all this could be a constituent. Kinetic means of operation, like your conventional operations or limited conventional operations, perhaps. They are very much means of it. Subversion, sabotage, subversion. This could be a means of it. Like I said, even you can utilize in hybrid warfare, you can utilize criminal elements also. The aggressor, the aggressor would like to avoid attribution in totality, that there is no dearth of evidence, that kind of thing. In addition to these forms of warfare, there's certain, I would say, influence means available. And these means are like fake news, use of mass media, diplomacy, even diplomacy, lawfare, they have come to know, they have come to term, or lawfare that you keep going to international courts, keep having cases against the other chap, keep getting him tied down, keep having the whole thing up there in the media, global media. So that kind of a thing. Foreign electoral intervention, like the Russians have been accused of in US, they're also a part of hybrid warfare. So Ukraine recently, the kind of things that you see a huge amount of conventional forces. You see certain elements within Ukraine being supported by elements outside Ukraine, let's say the Russians. So you have your element, and they've also amassed over 1 lakh troops. So they haven't gone into war. They're threatening war, but they've got certainly regulars, perhaps guided by certain regulars from them. That's what is being talked about by NATO countries, I suppose. And so it's a huge mix of all these things. Uh, the concept is basically to target distant objects, and processes like, let's say, your electrical transmission processes through non-traditional forms of warfare that you have available with you. In a way, it's an asymmetric approach to warfare, I would say.
Excuse me. So, would disruption of flow of information services come under this aspect, sir? Because this is something that we see the Chinese attempting to kind of do with its adversaries. We saw attacks within India. We saw attacks within the US as well.
Yeah, definitely. You see, we are entirely information technology dependent these days. Not entirely, I would say, largely information technology dependent these days. And that's not the case just with India, that's the case globally. So, what they see as your vulnerabilities are also their vulnerability. Yes, of course, they can interfere with our information systems and definitely go for it. If you want me to dwell on the kind of objectives that the Chinese or the Pakistanis, for that matter, could go into, then I'll go further into it.
Sure, we'll talk about Pakistan and China, of course. The master in something like this. But I'd like to come to terrorism, sir, and we see terrorism being used by the Pakistanis, if I may, as a low-cost option to their goals within Kashmir, for that matter, and also in Afghanistan. They've gone ahead and done what they need to do at a very, very low cost to their own regular forces, and that's something that I feel that they're an advantage, because over here we are killing the terrorists and they're not losing any blood of their own. So it's a gain and less loss approach for them, their own self. How do you see the aspect of terrorism fitting into this hybrid warfare scenario, sir?
See, terrorism, I look at it two ways. How does it fit in, and how do terrorists use hybrid warfare? Both ways. See, terrorism, like I said, hybrid warfare is an umbrella kind of a thing. Terrorism is part of that umbrella. It's part of the usage by any state actor, non-state actor. A state actor also, after all, uses terrorism. Like in our case, Pakistan uses. It's like a proxy war. They're using the terrorist groups who have been able to establish themselves to some extent or more than India. So terrorism, I would say, is one of the tools. And as far as the terrorists are concerned, they can use the other tools of hybrid warfare. Other tools, I'm talking about electronic warfare, I'm talking about cyber warfare, I'm talking about, let's say, a certain amount of conventional forces, the way the Russians have deployed on the Ukraine borders, that sort of a thing. So they can be talking about it. If it goes beyond that, the Russian troops go inside Ukraine, then we will not call it hybrid warfare, we will call it straight conventional warfare. Using hybrid means available, every other means available. Today, everyone uses every means possible. So the way I look at it, is the terrorists could use the tools basically of hybrid warfare. Now, like you have seen in our case, whenever the state supports the terrorists, like Lashkar-e-Toiba or Hizbul Mujahideen or some other group being supported by Pakistan, then their capabilities increase phenomenally to go into the hybrid warfare. This thing. Normally, a terrorist group may not have the kind of capability required for a cyber warfare, which is part of a hybrid warfare, or they may not have the capability for electronic warfare, which the sponsoring state could possibly give it to them. This is the way that it's being fought out. I'll give you an example of sabotage. This was, I think, very recently, 2021, in South Africa, they had one of these power breakdowns. Mm-hmm. And when the whole thing was gone into, it was found to be a case of sabotage. Now, they haven't really been able to find a linkage between the guys who actually did the crime, let's say, or sabotaged the system, and a state. But It's possible where you have a lot of, especially, let's say, socially not so cohesive a state, to find people who are ready to go do sabotage at the calling of a third state, another party, or a terrorist group. So all that gets into this particular thing.
Interesting. So we see the use of social media, mass media, especially social media, Twitter for that matter, as a weapon today to create chaos on any small issue. And examples of this we can see every second day. We had a huge, row of conversations going on about this whole Netaji statue at Amar Jawan Jyoti, and it was twisted by some, it was taken advantage by some, it was pushed across by some, and this is a whole narrative building exercise that is being done, which is an open invitation to any adversary to find a crack within a system, sir. What are the impacts of something like this, and how does one prepare? Because it's dealing with the general populace of a country. It's for a large country like us. What do we do?
See, first and foremost, I think we have to get into the idea that we have to live through with it. As long as you are internet connectivity dependent, you're going to be living through with it. So let's get used to the idea that we will be living through with it. The big advantage of social media, like anybody knows about, is the huge reach. And that makes it a huge, big challenge for the state to control it. If you control it, you're not being very democratic. If you don't control it, well, something like what you've just given an example of, any issue, Netaji Subhash Bose's statue issue, had become such a big issue. After so many years, so many decades of independence, so many decades of since we've lost him already, it's been made a big issue. So any issue which can otherwise have some sort of a grip on the population can explode, and that explosion, if allowed to be carried on beyond a point, can really implode the society. You might have those fractures showing up in the society. So that's why it is. Now, uh, when this messaging starts on the social media, there is always within the social media a counter wave also which starts. If you notice it.
Mm.
Right. So let's not get so concerned that this message in the social media, which seems to be, let's say, disturbing social cohesion or the populace, their faith in the government or anything as big as that, there's always a counter wave going on.
Goes up and
But
down.
yeah, so there's a collision. So as far as you and me, the listener, the viewer, the one who's reading the social media messages are concerned, well, we get actually both sides of the story in the bargain. So certain amount of your own discretion also comes into play as a person who is the consumer really of social media, and maybe you will be able to, by and large, people should be able to say this is perhaps not the whole story. The whole story is, well, lies somewhere in between at best. So that's what it is. The people themselves are there now. But as far as the government is concerned, or any organization which is suffering from a social media attack is concerned, there's an immediate necessity to respond. See, news is like they say, if you don't give any news, then you leave a vacuum behind you, and that vacuum is against nature. The vacuum will get filled up, and it will all get filled up by counterproductive messages to you. So you have to react that much faster. Facts have to be put across. The electronic and visual media also play a certain, I would say, it dampens the social media's capability to influence beyond a point, because the electronic and the visual media, these media, they come under a certain amount of regulations. So they have to do a little bit of investigation before they can report a particular thing on the screen. So whatever, be it on the print pages, whatever. So they come out with a little more researched idea about it, and which often contradicts what the social media wave was. So that's the kind of thing. You have to have emergency response teams in the country. You have to have them, let's say, all along scrutinizing what's happening in the social media, and will react accordingly.
In the political lingo, probably an IT cell to counter the narratives which are coming out. So I'm going to take up China now. we've been seeing some sort of and I would like to continue with the demographic attack of hybrid warfare, because as a citizen of this country, it's very difficult for me to defend a Chinese attack on my electronic grid or on my banking system or anything of that particular sort. I could probably not open fishy emails and this and that, but beyond that, there's not much citizen can do. But looking at China, sir, we saw some incidents, and allow me to kind of put it out there. We saw the flag raising in the so-called Galwan Valley that they put it out. We saw the Pengong So bridge being put up. And one thing that a lot of people have not been able to connect is the visit of Kiran Rijiju to Arunachal Pradesh, who's a central minister, and the sudden disappearance of this boy from the borders in Arunachal Pradesh. And the Chinese always try and kind of create an issue whenever there is something to do with Arunachal Pradesh that comes out. Again, this has not been brought about in the social media quite a bit. It's not even been discussed on TV. This is something that the Chinese win, because they keep doing these subtle moves around the place, and the long-term impact of something like this is a little more than what we can actually fathom at that particular point of time. What do we do for this?
Look, let's take these two incidents you talked about. The flag raising kind of an incident, or let's say the bridge on this thing, the bridge that they made over there, the one that you made a reference to, over the tube. So, firstly, that bridge is somewhere about 20 kilometers inside their area. So, inside their area, in the sense inside the area that they hold. I won't say that could be your area, that could be their area, but just I would say. So it's not exactly that they have done something about which we can straight away start objecting. It's not that. And when this very fact of it, that this bridge is so many kilometers inside their territory, was put across, I think the whole thing subdued, so got subdued. Now, as far as a flag is to be raised is concerned, well, they raised it wherever their own posts are behind that. And we also replied in the same coin. We raised it at our post, wherever we were. Now, we say this is no disputed territory, this is our territory. They also say this is not your territory, but our territory, not even disputed. The word dispute is not added by either of the sides. But all these things really, they created a wave. That wave dissipated, well, because there was not enough to support it further further going along, I suppose. So this kind of thing will happen, and that's what I've said, that you have to respond to it very fast. As the sooner you respond to it, the more will the control on the wave be yours.
The sad part about the story with China is that we can't attack in the same possible manner inside China because of their firewall. And the opportunities would be there, and I'm sure a lot of people know how to do that. But it's a little tough. So coming back to Pakistan, a small little puny little country around us with a mediocre sort of a system, falling economy, which is probably in the ground, political system in chaos, still has the capacity to raise up a Khalistan issue, which results at the end of it, the fervor that it created resulted in the Prime Minister's security also getting breached. Now, whatever you may say, it's a successful thing on their end. They might not be able to successfully secede the area of Punjab, and I don't know if that is their main purpose, but they are able to create a certain amount of chaos. How does this whole thing work, sir?
Well, there are two parts of it. Your response. One is an aggressive response. The other is, well, I would call it a defensive response to this kind of a thing. No, when it's a question of aggressive response, well, like the first requirement, of course, is detection. Then you have to deter, counter, and respond to the hybrid threat. So you have to put the whole story across. The fact of it is that that particular issue of Khalistan has no traction in India. It may have a traction with a small segment of people, maybe somewhere in the American continent. It may have it with some countries in the European continent. But for somebody like me who's been serving with Punjabis all my service life, after all, the larger percentage of officers during at least my period were from Punjab. So I have not found any one of them any new routes taking, any new routes being formed about any commitment to anything called Khalistan. So when you do not have an issue really, to create an issue out of it, well, you can try and create an issue out of it. But I'm sure the Punjabis of Punjab, they know that what's been their history. History matters one hell of a lot. After all, they came up as Sikhs to protect a certain faith, to defend a certain area, and they were anti-certain people. So all that is there as a part of history. It's difficult to wish away that history. So, I mean, I would say that we should try and not react too much to this kind of a thing also. Take the military means and take the law and order means, etc. But let us not uh, fan it more by getting involved. At times it's best not to react and let the message itself dissipate. So if you leave it to that. So that's one of the ways of handling the media when you get some bad media. You get a bad press about your organization or let's say whatever be it. So if you react to it, then the story carries on and on. You react, and then another question is thrown at you. You react again, and a third question is thrown at you. So don't get into that sort of a rut. Also, react very carefully and react with facts, figures, historical truths about Punjab.
I think that's very wise advice. Timing and the thought process would be critical in a time like this. So talking about my final question to you would be about decisiveness of hybrid warfare. One of the options in front of the Chinese today would be to attack Taiwan in a very soft hybrid way to create a bloodless sort of a takeover. Because at the end of it, if they attack the Taiwanese island, it's going to be barren land and they're going to be taking over because their fight is going to be right to the hilt. Do you think that there is a possibility that a hybrid war could be as decisive as a takeover of a area or a defeat of an opponent?
Look, let's take a look at Taiwan, and then we'll come to this more general affair of whether it can be, whether uh, hybrid warfare can be called a decisive warfare. Also, is what you're trying to say. Now, as far as Taiwan is concerned, you see, it's about 100 kilometers plus the Taiwan Strait that separates China and Taiwan, and in fact, it's about 100 miles plus, if I'm not wrong, not kilometers. And to invade Taiwan, you need a whole armada to do it, like the way you invaded France from England in the Second World War. You need to make a landing that big in Taiwan, and Taiwan itself is very mountainous, very mountainous. If you look through the map, it's very mountainous, and it's not really possible. And the actual landing areas, which can be, let's say, utilized to put in a major force, are limited. Unlimited. Every seashore is not a landing area. You have to have some conditions being fulfilled for so many ships of that size to come in and will discharge their troops over there and their logistic maintenance thereafter. So it's not a cakewalk for China to be doing anything like that. I am leaving aside the entire aspect of international relations altogether.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Leaving aside that aspect of international relations altogether, in case Taiwan may not find itself all by the Taiwanese themselves. Let's say there may be other countries which will come into it, and it could be very large countries like the Americans, the Japanese. They know after Taiwan, in case Taiwan can be handled by China, the next target is the Japanese also. So I don't think it's that easy. Now coming to the second part of the story, that is question that you asked, that whether hybrid warfare can actually make it decisive, be it in India or be it in Taiwan, be it anywhere. A lot of people say that it can perhaps now be called another decisive method of warfare. My personal opinion is, you see, in certain areas, hybrid warfare, which we haven't talked about, I'll just spend a minute on that. When you can, if you can, by hybrid warfare, create a social disturbance that creates a fraction amongst communities, whether by color, whether by religion, or whether by clan, or whether by any other possible divisive instrument that you can define on ground for people of this, then you're more prone to hybrid warfare being successful. then you are more prone to what is called, what I said, I think in between also, an implosion. You have that country imploding by itself. I would say that is the test of a hybrid war strategicians, a game plan. It's like it's then that they achieve what Sun Tzu had said: the best way of winning a war is without fighting it. The Chinese scholar, very uh, reputed Chinese scholar, he said that. But I don't think any country which is being attacked by hybrid forms of warfare really would not be doing anything to counter it. So when you see hybrid warfare being launched from one side and being countered from the opponent's side, the other side, perhaps what will happen is that your you will have softened the state that against whom you have launched hybrid warfare for the employment of your conventional resources. Let's take the case of Bangladesh. And so we did all those hybrid elements. There was Mukti Bahini, it was trained, it was going inside, it was giving you intelligence, right? You had pinpoint intelligence about Chinese, about Pakistani deployment over there. When you went in, there was Mukti Bahini there to help you out, tell you the routes, etc., things like that. A combination of a lethal force by a strong nation like India and Mukti Bahini, it made the journey just a 13 days affair from the borders to Dhaka. So it softened up the enemy's opposition in a big way. And hybrid warfare could possibly do that. I would say that.
Sir, thank you so much for taking us through the story of hybrid warfare. It's important that all of us understand this sort of a game because it's being played with us day in and day out. As you mentioned, social media is one of the biggest things, which is biggest targets, if I may rephrase myself, which is being used for an attack on the general populace of a country. We've seen it not just with us, we've seen it happening to the Americans, we've seen it happening all over the world, and we can see these, a lot of times when we see news, we see very silly protests that are taking place that, in today's lingo, if I may say, we face palm ourselves. But, we do realize the impact that a particular news would have had on that particular population, how things would have actually taken forward. Once again, sir, thank you so much for joining, and till next time for another subject on another day, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Adi. Thanks a lot. Always nice to be on your platform. Jai Hind.